Yes, my G's. Today I want to talk about saturation and distortion and the difference between them. A lot of you guys might already know how to use saturation, how to use distortion, what the difference actually is. But some people not quite sure, what the main differences are. And it's very, very simple. So this video should take 5 minutes or so, right? But basically, this is how I always understood it. And this is just how I wrapped my head around it, basically. So saturation is a form of distortion. It's just a subtle, more gentler one, okay? So whether you're saturating or you're distorting, both times you're distorting, essentially, But saturating, you're basically distorting in a more gentle way. So if you have, for example, a distortion plugin like, let's say, the kilohertz distortion, you can actually use it to distort or to saturate, depending on the mode that you use and depending on how hard you drive it. Same thing with like Isotope Trash or other distortion plugins like that. You'll have ways to distort the sound or to saturate the sound. And so basically I kind of always think about, I kind of have the difference in my head that distort is literally to change, because you're distorting it, you're changing it into something new. And saturate is you're basically, just as if you were saturating a kitchen sponge, and like you're just putting more water into it and it's just getting like more saturated, so it's just more of the same, so think distortion to change the sound, saturation to give more of the same sound. That's how I always imagine it. So when it comes to mixing and sound design, distortion would be something that falls more into sound design, the sound design category, and saturation falls more into like the mixing kind of side of things, because saturating, you're basically, you're just enhancing what you've already got, or you're squeezing more volume out of what you've already got. And I mentioned in my previous video about saturation that you're sort of coloring the sound as well. So you're squeezing more perceived volume out of it and you're lightly coloring it. Okay, so there is like a light coloration involved. So you can use that, in terms, to design the sound to an extent as well, But it's very different to distortion, where you're actually like on purposely like changing the sound, distorting it into something new. So when it comes to sound design as well, one tip for when you're using distortion is, I love to do distortion like on layers. So if I wanted to distort my bass line or distort, a lead or something like that, what I would aim to do would be to create a distorted version of the sound and layer it back on the original. So I can have a bass line, keep it clean and have like a distorted sound to it, but I haven't distorted it to the point of, degrading the actual sound quality. So when you're using plugins like Trash, or with really high extreme distortion settings, or the kilohertz distortion, or any distortion plugin, even Ruiner, that's a great one, that's one of my favorites, that's a free one, that's excellent for creative distortion. I often in my workflow, and I advise you guys to do the same as well, if you want like a new distortion tone on like a sound, I would test, like especially for basses, right? I would test, going over the board with creative plugins like distortion plugins to really create something new, and then use that and then layer it back over the top of your original bass sound. So you can really, if you employ this technique, what it allows you to do is go really, off the beaten path with the distortion, like go crazy with it. Use multiple distortions, use those really crazy over the top distortion plugins where you think, oh, this is going to like ruin the sound because it's just too much. There's no limits really. You can just go as crazy as you want, because you're creating like a layer of like a new distortion layer, and then you can blend that back on top of your original sound, which was hopefully clean to begin with, and so if you treat this, if you like kind of think about distortion in that way, you can create new overtones, new harmonics, like crazy new sound effects using any distortion plugin you want. And then like it's all about your layering skills and your mixing skills to get that new distortion layer to fit well in the rest of your track, like layering it back on top of your original sound, So my golden tip for distortion is go crazy, but do it as a distortion layer and then blend it back in. And with saturation, that's something you can do directly on the sound, So whether you saturate the whole thing, like you use the 23 hot cold, something like that on the drums, saturate the whole drums at once, a little bit, that's really great. Or you use multi-band saturation like the free T saturator, or even using the kilohertz distortion as a saturation tool with a multi-pass mode, so you just saturate the mids and the highs, that kind of thing. You can do that directly on the channel, and that's more of a like mixing kind of thing where you're kind of boosting the sound, you know, squeezing more volume out of the sound, giving it a slight bit of color, and that's like saturation for me. So just to recap, super simple, right? Distortion is changing the sound. Saturation is subtly coloring, but just giving more of the same, essentially. And technically it falls under the category of distortion as well, but it's like a much gentler form of distortion, you know? And so proper distortion, use it in sound design, create new layers and blend them back in. And saturation, do it directly on the channels where you need to get that kind of volume increase. And you sort of color the sound very slightly when you do it, but you're just basically enhancing what you've already got with saturation. You're not changing into something new like you are with distortion. So a lot of you guys might already know this, and that's how I've always wrapped my head around it. But I know for a lot of more beginner producers, or some intermediate producers who are not quite sure on the difference of distortion and saturation, it helps to have this kind of analogy, this metaphor to explain it. Like that's how I kind of get my head around it, and then you'll know like what you're looking for, you know, what you're trying to do in a certain part of your, you know, composition or arrangement or workflow. You know like, okay, I'm going to over distort, create a layer here, or I'm just going to saturate to get a bit more volume from this sound, you know. So hopefully that clears up a little bit of, you know, for those people who need that to be cleared up, you know, the distortion versus saturation, how they kind of both can be used like in the most effective way. So thank you very much for listening and watching today. I really appreciate you guys on the channel. Please make sure you hit the like button. It really helps out with the algorithm, so make sure you do that as well. And leave a comment down below if this helped you out. Subscribe as well. And you can also check out the links in my video descriptions. I've got great preset packs on my website for Serum, Faceplant, Current and Vital. I've got one-on-one classes available. Mastering services are available too. I've got a great Patreon community with a Discord and feedback live streams and much more, so come along and join us in there. And there's also some affiliate links down below if you need some new drum and bass samples, like drum samples. I recommend a certain company, link down below. There's the best like high quality kicks and snares. All right, thank you my G's. That's it for me today. More from me very soon. Much love.